Evil. They keep getting mad at me because I'm wearing makeup, so they can't kiss me. They can't give me a little smooch. Yeah, what are you gonna do? Huh?
Kids who grow up with emotionally intense parents, parents who got mad a lot, who lost their temper, who were critical and controlling, or just everything always had to be just so, can really struggle with what I call low-key hypervigilance. Here are some questions to ask yourself, and we'll talk more about it at the end. Are you ready? Number one, you find yourself often wanting to avoid social interactions. And when you do set things up, you almost always wish that you hadn't said yes. And up until the very last minute, you kind of don't want to go. And then you go, you have an okay time, but it's exhausting as soon as you get home. Number two, you take things really personally. Even if you don't outwardly show it, you're always thinking, yeah, what did I do wrong? This is something to do with me. Your go-to is never, oh, this might be about them. You over-focus on a person's facial expression.
There's nothing wrong with my body. Fat is not a dirty word. If my body tells me something, I will make sure it is heard. If my body is a vessel, I will give it what it needs. I will not betray my body, no matter what they think of me.
How the fuck are you bitches cleaning? How? It's like it's not in my DNA or something, and I know what.
Hi, my name is Nikki. I hold a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology, and I specifically help people, neurodivergent peeps, to be more productive. And I want to break down a technique that I use for myself and with my clients because I also have anxiety and I'm neurodivergent. Hey! And it's called June bugging. June bugging was a technique that was first started on Tumblr, and basically what it means is that you have an anchor point. So you're gonna be really specific about what you're cleaning. You're not cleaning your bedroom, you're cleaning your bed. You're not cleaning the kitchen, you're cleaning your sink. That is your anchor point, and you're always gonna come back to that anchor point because we're working with our brain. We know that we are going to get distracted. So you start cleaning your bed, you make an iced coffee, you go back to making your bed. I'm making my bed, but I see a bunch of wires and I detangle them, then I go back to making my bed. We repeat that until we finish making the bed.
Blind react to this video and indicate whether you think each thing is cheating or not cheating. Your partner has a best friend of the opposite gender. Your partner says, "I love you" to their friends. Your partner pays for lunch with their friend of the opposite gender. Your partner kidnaps Ambassador to Italy Sean P. Crowley and locks him in the basement. Your partner flirts with the barista at your favorite coffee shop. Your partner sends and receives spicy pictures to someone they only know through the internet. Your partner watches porn. Your partner holds Ambassador Crowley at knife point and forces him to write a letter resigning from his governmental position, effective immediately. Your partner posts on someone else's Facebook timeline for their birthday. Your partner dresses Ambassador Crowley up in a chicken costume and forces him to eat dry corn off the basement floor while clucking and flapping his arms.
Got another shorty, she ain't nothing like me. Yeah, gotta catch another fight. The apple bottom make him wanna bite. I just wanna have a good night. I just wanna have a good night. Hold up.
Imagine a world where Disney represented Indigenous people appropriately, instead of glorifying our first MMIW Pocahontas or Matoaka. A better option would have been to make a movie about our first Indigenous peacemaking explorer, who was also a young woman. It was the year 1713, and neighboring tribes, the Dene and the Nehewak, also known as the Cree, had been fighting for generations. A young Dene girl named Ta Nalter, we'll call her Ta for short, was living in her village when it was attacked by the Cree tribe. They had recently acquired guns from trading with Europeans, and with this advantage, took Ta as a prisoner. She was between 13 and 16, and instead of accepting her fate, she observed and plotted her escape. As the seasons changed and the Cree moved camp, Ta seized her chance and escaped. She tried to find her people, but the journey was cold and difficult, so she was forced to turn around and seek refuge with the European camps. Once there, She befriended the Hudson's Bay governor, advocated for her people, and negotiated to trade with them for peace. But first, introductions had to be made. So, surrounded by the enemy tribe, Ta set out in the spring of 1715 with 150 Nehewak for a peacemaking expedition. By this time, she had learned some Cree, some English, and made European connections for trading. They had many gifts, but since Ta was calling out the enemy tribe for killing her people and calling them cowards along the way, it wasn't the safest journey for the young Dene woman. She was braver than she was wiser for giving. 7 months of sickness, starvation, and severe weather caused most of the group to turn around. Some Cree people even resorted to eating their dogs. A lack of food caused the group to further separate to hunt. When Ta finally came across some Dene tracks, they found a recently slaughtered village. The other group that had separated from them had found them first. Bringing a group of Nehewak right to the scene of a massacre in the heart of Dene territory was suicidal, so they had to turn around. Ta hadn't come this far to turn around, so she set out alone. The expedition party waited 10 days at camp before they journeyed back, and on the 10th day, Ta appeared with 160 Dene following her to make peace and trade relations. She died shortly after, but if it hadn't been for her, would the Dene have traded with the Europeans, or would they have died off like so many other tribes?
This is how different generations react when you tell them that you're asexual. Nice. That's pretty normal. Really? Wow, I can not relate. I am just so horny all the time. Ah, come on. You just haven't found the right person yet. You haven't met someone who's pressed the right buttons. Why are you crying? Where are you going? I feel so torn because on the one hand, I feel that you owe me grandchildren, but then on the other hand, this means that you can stay pure forever.
Basically, my family and I just deeply disagree politically.
So I'm not here to dogpile on that young lady who's obviously having a very, very hard time right now. And if you want more context, go back and watch the original video. But long story short, she was called a failure and said to have ruined Christmas by her own mother because they disagree politically. She is more aligned with, quote unquote leftist ideals, while her mother is more aligned and the rest of her family is more aligned with, right-wing ideals. But here's what I have to say. White people who have demonstrated that they have basic human empathy towards people unlike themselves have been largely isolated and ostracized within their own community. This has been demonstrated throughout history a lot, but I feel like the two movements that perfectly exemplify this is the hippie and the environmentalist movement, right? So hippies back in the 60s and 70s, because they were pacifists, because they were free thinkers and largely anti-racist. What were they deemed as? These crazy, stupid kids who just wanted to do drugs and stay out in the woods all day and do psychedelics. They were barred from getting jobs even, their own families kicked them out of their homes. Same with environmentalists. White environmentalists who believed that humans and the earth had an interconnected relationship, were deemed as tree huggers. They were unserious, they were softies. What's going on now with the quote unquote woke movement? White people who have demonstrated that, hey, you shouldn't treat LGBTQ plus folks and black people and other people of color like garbage, have been vilified in the media. They're unserious. They, don't think realistically. They are woke and you shouldn't be woke. So yeah, I feel like she's learning like a really, really hard lesson that if you are a white person in this country and you are not aligned with white supremacist ideals, your personal politic isn't aligned with white supremacist ideals, you will be slowly pushed out and ostracized by the very people who fed and took care of you. And I find that very interesting. And by interesting, I mean sad.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Today we're going to say thank you in Anishinaabe Moan.
Moon.
Miigwech.
Miigwech.
But also, miigwech.
Miigwech.
It means my spirit is full. That's what I was taught. But we say miigwech to say thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is for educational purposes. If you are the type of person to think that spanking your child will have no outcome on their brain development or emotional regulation, please consider the results of the 2021 study conducted by Harvard University. They found that kids that are spanked are more likely to develop depression, anxiety, and PTSD related disorders because that action causes greater neural response in multiple areas of your prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that's largely responsible for decision making based on environmental and interpersonal cues. Greater neural response in this area of the brain basically means that your prefrontal cortex is overworking and detecting threats in certain environments when they're not really there. And when you perceive threat negatively when it's not really there, that's what contributes to those types of disorders. This basically means that if you're spanking your kids, you're quite literally affecting the development and formation of their prefrontal cortex, which is impairing their decision-making skills to perceive both negative and positive interactions. The study also found that kids that are spanked have lower levels of social engagement in school environments and lower levels of emotional regulation in general. And it doesn't matter if you consider spanking a form of trauma or not. This study also found that greater neural response is also associated in the same children that experience other forms of maltreatment or severe abuse. Which means that no matter the severity of the spanking, your child is having the exact same outcomes as other children who experience severe traumas. The results of this study also imply that this could have severe outcomes in the way that your child engages in relationships in their future. So while you may find spanking an easier form of discipline to use with your child right now, I highly encourage you to consider how this is going to affect your child neurobiologically and socially and emotionally in the long run. Like at this point, we're not just complaining when somebody tells you, oh, maybe you shouldn't spank your kids. Like there's a reason.
Shit like this brings the movement down. Everyone's a feminist until there is a spider around.